All right, and I think we're live. And I've been absent for a while. If anyone needs to be caught up, I moved across the country and I have a little baby now. And so I've been pretty busy and I've been making a big video that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And finally, with this changing of the new administration, there's not much more happening on that topic. So I can finish that up. And yeah, so hopefully I'll be getting back more into YouTube. This is kind of my dipping back in. I know I take absences sometimes, but it should be a little more stable going forward. So today with me, I have his username is Keeping Up on YouTube, and we've been engaging in comments a little bit. And let's see, originally I guess it was on some of the like Standing or Truth or something.
Yeah.
And we were, let's see. Well, you mentioned that you wanted to ask me about the name of my channel, if you want to start there.
Yeah, it resonates with the speech that Al Pacino made in Devil's Advocate. So he says, "I'm pro-human. I love mankind. I never condemned you." That's like what are you gonna do? Worship that? He tells you to enjoy this, but you can't enjoy. That whole speech. Do you know it?
I've been
It's a
meaning to see that
fantastic.
movie. I haven't seen it though.
It's not a great movie, but that dialogue that comes out of the devil is fantastic. It came from people who really kind of understood the dilemma. But
Okay.
yeah, very, very good movie. 90s icon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's on my list.
yeah, it's a good one. So you won't be wasting your time. The other
Yeah.
one is Idiocracy. If you haven't seen Idiocracy,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
That one's a good one. It aged well.
And anyway,
Yeah, I'm just gonna check that my stream is going well. Okay. Audio's going good. Anyway, we'll get back to it. So the idea behind the name of the channel, there's a common idea that the snake was telling the truth in the Garden of Eden, and that God was kind of the villain in that story.
yeah,
And I
it
do
doesn't make any
ascribe to
sense.
that. Yeah. And I think that as the story is presented, there were no lies there coming from the snake. And it would be right for people to have the knowledge of good and evil. Basically, the tagline I kind of say sometimes is knowledge of good and evil is a good thing. And it wouldn't make sense how we were supposed to know not to take it if we didn't have it in the first place. It's kind of a self-fulfilling feedback loop. So the way it's presented, if you take it literally, God is kind of not even foreseeing the situation that he himself set up specifically, which doesn't make sense with the claimed characteristics of God. I look at the story more as mythology, and just like any other mythology, a lot of it doesn't make sense as on the surface level, but if you understand the symbology of and the language of symbols that people spoke at the time, it makes more sense as literature. It is also a response to common mythology in the Near East at the time as well. They were kind of reframing the myth in the Enuma Elish, which was also about a global flood, the gods trying to get rid of humanity in similar circumstances, and the Hebrews kind of cast their high god and with a different motivation, although it kind of depends on some of the translations. Some of them say the gods wanted to kill humans because we were too noisy. Some people have suggested that, in fact, the noise that we were making is more of a colorful way of saying similar things to what the Bible said, which was that they were being bad. Essentially, they're like evil was flourishing. Not sure if I have an opinion on that yet. Anyway, so I kind of like the Jordan Peterson take on the Bible. I know that's gonna piss off a lot of the people on my side, but it's his take on the Bible is pretty much secular, and I think Alex O'Connor has said this before. Like Jordan Peterson is actually, the way he describes what he believes is actually more atheistic, because he's saying take the Bible as literature. Which I interpret the Garden of Eden story as the story of God is just the cold hard consequences of the world, and the knowledge of good and evil is just the nature of humans. We're self-aware. With knowledge and wisdom comes suffering, and that's just inevitable. It's not, you can't negotiate with it. That's why God isn't behaving rationally in the story, because it's not meant to create a realistic image of a conscious mind. It's just meant to represent the natural consequences of having awareness and self-awareness and intelligence, which is that you understand how crazy things really are. You can't live in ignorance as bliss anymore because you're an intelligent being. And that's the long version of my channel's name, I guess.
That is brilliant. That is your rationalization on why these things should be written in your heart, which is, you're concerned about society.
Oh yeah.
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 So that's the point. I mean, there's a lot to say in what you just said. I mean, a ton. I mean, it's PhD level books that need to be written on that commentary. But to be very basic and simple, I look at the Old Testament writings as the time before man knew God. Because as far as the Christian realization is concerned, we didn't know anything about God until Jesus showed up, and we even fought him. So all these interpretations of the past, how God's the bad guy, to me, the garden, it wasn't the serpent and then God showing up. It was the serpent the whole time. So what the serpent did is he put a guilt trip on Adam and Eve and then condemned them for it. Okay. And if you read that again and you say, let me read this and think, is it the serpent the whole time? You'll have that epiphany, because when Jesus shows up, he says, no, I love you. I love you to death. Whoever started this early lie that you'll be ashes to ashes and dust to dust, that's the main lie, is to tell mankind that you're just nothing but a beast, and you're on the menu, and there's evidence that we're on the menu. I mean, there are sharks and bears and wolves, and so, but we have our instincts and our camaraderie to fend that stuff off. So I think much of the Old Testament, to me, the only interaction was Moses on Mount Sinai. All the other interactions were false. It came from Abraham's time. So Abraham,
well, that sounds a little bit like some of the Gnostic stuff.
I don't take the labels. Donnie's been calling me a monarchia, because I fight him on the idea of this Trinitarian thing where they're saying, no, it's three Godheads. There's the Holy Spirit, the Father, and that's a different person, and then there's Jesus, and Jesus is not Holy Spirit. And it's like that completely ignores the story of how Jesus got here on the planet, and God's actions that caused that to happen. I'm just like, where do you what? And I don't care. I don't think it matters that they believe this Godhead thing. It's not part of any requirement that's in there, but they're so adamant about it. It's like they'll accuse you of being blasphemous and what is that other word? Heretical, you know.
Mhm.
What? You're kidding me. There's actually no mention of the word Trinity in the Bibles. There's no discussion about any
Yeah,
level of importance it has. Like, what are you?
and
It's
none of the
weird.
none of the Jewish uh, schools of thought ever thought that the Holy Spirit was a separate person from God.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
People like, and the whole Mormon Church, as much as I am not a fan, they're not Trinitarian either. I mean, so there's
I just want to know why they think it's important because they act like,
yeah,
oh no, it's you're going to go to hell if you don't believe in the Trinity. What? No, and then
yeah,
there's
that
this guy.
seems superfluous. Yeah,
Well, it's not.
I think you can start a conversation about Jesus and the Father being one, but it's a non-starter for me when people start saying the Holy Spirit is a separate third person. I'm like, that I don't understand what that means, or
So
really
it's the
have a
Holy.
sense of how it's a third person. And if you look in the text, it's always seems to be an extension of either the Spirit, the power of God, or of Jesus. So it's
Yeah.
that third person is kind of like, it's also kind of swept under the rug, like not as important as well. You don't hear a lot about it.
Well, it's weird because they've come up with the word triune, which is a
Mhm.
contradiction. It's like it's three in one. You know, like triune. You had to. Is where did this idea come from? But to be short, you ever heard of Nephilim Free? You ever heard of him? Yeah,
I'm familiar, yeah.
yeah. He's
We
funny,
go way
right?
back.
Okay, so he has the most precise definition of a Trinitarian, of what Trinitarian means. And he claims, I'm a Trinitarian. And what's wrong with this description? And it's perfect. And they jump down his throat like, you're going to hell for that. And I'm just like, what are you guys not? You guys don't get your book. You guys don't even get your book.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it kind of defeats the purpose of, like,
they're chasing people away and then labeling me.
yeah.
I'm a monarchianism. I'm a monarchia. I don't even know what that
Is
is.
it? I haven't heard of that. Is that maybe Manichaeism?
No, I think it means that you think God is all one, and if you think
Okay.
that, you think that they actually killed God on the cross. No, no. Jesus is Holy Spirit inherited by his Father, the Holy Spirit who got Mary pregnant. And Jesus is flesh inherited by his virgin mother, Mary, on earth
Yeah.
2025 years ago.
I mean, if it's details like that 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 save you or send you to hell, like,
No, it's
they've told
not. That's my
us
point. And that's why I'm
like,
asking them, why is it so important?
most believers are not even gonna think about that
Yeah, exactly.
distinction. So
Exactly.
it's just too in the weeds, you know.
And he's putting me in timeout and warning me, like, I'm going to delete the comment. And like, it doesn't change the fact of, the story behind Joseph and Mary and the, Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
Strange. But anyway,
Well, enough agreeing.
yeah.
So we left off kind of me saying, like, asking you a few questions.
Yeah,
And you
you want
said
to
you
know
had
the
a full
limits of the
response,
genome.
and it got deleted by YouTube. And I know I've been there many times. I now
Yeah.
write everything in a notepad first,
Yep.
and
I do
then,
the same thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
So, was that the,
I can try and find it, but
I don't want to, I don't want to, I don't want to
I'll
attack you. I want us to attack John Perry unstated clearly.
okay. So that's getting, well. I mean, I remember what it was. Basically,
But
we can do the chimp stuff first, but I do want to at least eventually get to, because, like, the questions I have are, like, to put it shortly, is just like trying to probe where someone feels that the limitations of evolution
yeah,
are.
yeah.
So
You speak of that in terms of expanding, like additional, new, better information. And
That's part of it, yeah.
You were speaking of it in terms of it's an accumulation, the accumulation of mutations, and so that's why this stated clearly video is important.
Okay. Before we jump into that, we have some pushback here. If you understand Trinity and then deny it, then there is a problem. Most who deny the Trinity and are Christian are Trinitarians, and they just don't know it.
Yeah, I'm a Trinitarian. I believe that the word Trinity is in reference to having to remind all people of who Jesus is. He wasn't just a dude walking around. He was a birth of an immaculate conception from the Holy Spirit as the Father. Okay, so you can't say, well, Jesus is God. Well, a lot of people don't know anything about Jesus, and that some dude was walking around and calling himself God? Well, here's the story, here's the backstory, and that's the definite or the description of the Trinity. The Trinity are aspects of the Holy Spirit's manifestation on earth. They're not three different persons or Godheads. So like if I say I'm a father, I'm a son, and I'm an uncle, that doesn't mean I'm three different persons. And so the Trinitarians get caught up in this what's called word thinking, and they can't, because it's a different word. It has to be a separate thing to them, and it's an intellectual deficit. So I'm like, how can you tell these guys? Because Donnie's not a dummy, but how can I say, Donnie, you have an intellectual deficit?
Well, I think people have, well, I guess you could call it dogmas, or I think of it kind of like a mind prison where like they keep their thoughts in these little cages, and they won't open. You can open the doors, but they just won't. They like it in the cage. But this comment kind of reminds me of like, if you've never, people bring up the problem of like, well, so a lot of people have never even heard of Jesus. Are you saying that they're damned to hell?
No,
because they don't accept Jesus him. And it's like, oh, well, you're only damned if you know about Christianity and then deny it. But it's that's at that point, like, if they're just not, if they don't have enough information, then they don't have enough information. So why, like there's most people are not going to be like, no, I'm just evil because I feel like I literally understand evil and I want to be evil for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And so P-Town wants me to leave the dark side. We'll leave it at that. And hello, Big Bag Mama. Good to see you. So let's see if we can't get this going. I'm going to start it at... There we go. At the retroviruses. I think I have it on twice speed right now.
Go to the beginning because he builds up to that, and then it ends at 303.
Okay.
I mean, after that, if you want to watch the whole thing, I'll watch the whole thing. But I didn't know how much time you had.
Oh, that's going real slow. Okay.
Probably heard that great apes like chimpanzees are humankind's closest living relatives. Even before evolution was discovered, scientists studying comparative anatomy already grouped humans into the ape family alongside chimpanzees. In those pre-evolution years, however, the word family was often used figuratively. Many scientists held a fixed species view. They thought humans and chimpanzees had been similar yet different since the dawn of time. This changed by the end of the 1800s. Along with the discovery of the process of evolution, the study of fossils convinced the majority of scientists that humans and chimps do share a common ancestor.
Any objections so far?
Not yet, because that's not specifically what I want to hone in on.
Okay. Well, I'll be pausing it a little bit just for copyright sake as well.
Okay. The problem is that this is the conversation no one's having, and it's the hurdle that's holding evolution back, actually. So if this hurdle is overcome, then the evolutionists can keep running forward with everything they've ever always said. But if they don't address it, it's a full stop on evolution. At least
Alright.
the story behind this, the ape-human shared ancestor.
Well, okay. I
So
want
that's
you
my
to
commentary on the
elaborate on that, but maybe
I will.
okay.
I will.
Really are family. Today, hundreds of transitional fossils have been found representing over 20 distinct groups which blur the line between humans and chimpanzees. That said, some people feel that the study of fossils is too subjective. Is there an independent line of evidence we can use to double-check what we think we know from the study of fossils and anatomy? Dr. Francis Collins, the man who directed the Human Genome Project, rightfully pointed out that the study of DNA gives us an entirely independent, quantifiable way to test our ideas about evolution. Instead of simply taking his word for it, here we will examine the evidence for ourselves. It's widely known that DNA is great at revealing family relationships. In the court of law, DNA evidence is the gold standard for determining who the father is. DNA evidence is now widely used in the study of genealogy to figure out more distant family relationships. And there are many independent ways that DNA evidence can be used to reveal family relationships even between different species. Here, we'll zoom in on just one line of DNA evidence, endogenous retrovirus DNA shared across species. In this case, between humans and chimpanzees. To understand why retrovirus DNA is such a big deal.
Okay, so related to that other question I want to talk about is like there's a similar problem in genetics as like, well, what's the limit of where you can use similarities in DNA to show that two animals or humans or whatever are actually related? And it's the exact same principle, but it's harder to talk about because it's mostly just data and figures, and it's just more complex.
Let's first take a quick look at what retroviruses are. A retrovirus is a special type of virus that reproduces by inserting its genes directly into a cell's DNA. The virus genes become a seamless, permanent part of the host cell's genome. The cell treats the virus DNA as if it were its own. It reads the virus genes, using them to make new viruses, and when the cell copies its own DNA before reproducing, it also copies the virus DNA and passes it on as well. In mammals, modern retroviruses usually infect white blood cells.
Okay,
If, however, a retrovirus happens...
That was what he just asserted, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So he went and showed a graphic, and that's one place where the creationists have got us completely beat. I mean, the evolutionists have creationists completely beat, is the ability to illustrate like that, to make that cartoon, that visual. That's good stuff, but he's got a dividing cell that has an insertion in it, and then the cell divides into its insertions. Well, okay, so he's describing a somatic cell, right? That can happen in a somatic cell and become a cancer or an errant cell or a dysfunctional cell, something that's going to lose the battle of efficiency and get beat out by, like, say it's a skin cell. So you might get a little rash or a bump or something, and it gets extracted because that insertion has changed the protein efficiency or whatever, or functionality, or maybe it doesn't function at all. Who knows? But it's not in tip-top condition anymore. That came from the inherited lineage of genomes that have been successful. It's got a new sequence inserted. So I suspect it's either going to be some kind of errant cell. It's not going to last. But that's in your body, so your body does stuff about that to get rid of them. So is that at past 303 yet?
Nope.
Okay.
249.
Sorry. Yeah, keep going. This is
to infect a sperm cell or egg cell, and if that sperm or egg cell ends up participating in fertilization, the resulting child will have a copy of virus DNA in every single one of her cells. She'll even pass it on to her kids if she has children.
Wrong. 100% wrong. So
why is that wrong?
Because of the two gametes. Okay. So he's saying if that random insertion mutation got into a sperm cell, then, okay, that's in a chromosome, one of the chromosomes, the haploid, 23 pair, right? It's 22, actually. There's 22 autosomes. I'm assuming that's an autosome, insertion, because if it got into a sex chromosome, I don't know if anything would work. I don't think it would, no. But either way, in an autosome, it's like a lock and key. There's a purine pyrimidine freaking lattice structure that doesn't change. Okay, a purine has to be facing a pyrimidine, and that's where the molecular forces that keeps DNA stranded are hydrogen bonds. It's like little magnets. So if it's a purine or a pyrimidine, they would bolt apart like two north poles or two south poles. Okay, there would be no molecular force hydrogen bond keeping that strand together. And if you do a purine insertion mutation, it does lead to DNA instability. So when you shift the sequence with an insertion, now you've created a situation where now that chromosome that's been modified doesn't have a homologue anymore. So something's going to happen with that pair of chromosomes. They're either going to cause a disaster, they're not going to pair, you know. It's not going to be heritable. Right? It's not going to be heritable because in order for it to be heritable, you can't have that offset of the coding regions in that pair of chromosomes. You just offset it. So he took a truth that something that can happen in a somatic cell, and then he asserts that, oh, if it happened in a gamete, it's all automatically going to get passed on to all the offspring in every cell, but he never describes the mechanism on how that could happen. And it's unforgivable because in this age of all the sequencing technologies and the supercomputing that could easily map that out and explain that, there's not even an experiment that I've read where they say, okay, let's take a chromosome, add a retrovirus-sized insertion into it, and see if it works and see if it gets passed on. Not a single paper out there. It's all just that, where he just says, oh, it gets inserted and then passes on to everybody. Well, I would argue that if that got passed on to everybody, then he's now permanently sterile because he's got a permanent chromosome that's not going to pass on because the rest of the population doesn't have that insertion. So you see what I'm saying? It certainly wouldn't carry all the chromosomes. It definitely wouldn't. It might happen that a human would come out, but like the same way a donkey came out of a horse with 2 chromosomes missing.
Maybe in a majority of the cases, but there's certainly you can have missing sections of chromosome. You can have full duplications of chromosome,
but is it heritable? Does it pass on to a new generation and change? See, this is another thing. You know, when I say change the genome, you know, and you mentioned, well, recombination changes the genome. You know, like when you're talking about cats and stuff. Well, it's a new combination of that same genome, but it doesn't restructure it where you've got the differences between chimpanzees and humans. They're so vastly differently structured that those early studies, like in the one in 1975, they broke down the protein sequences. They weren't even looking at the DNA. They broke down proteins and then electrophoresisly compared them. It's not even that's the same methodology they use to find out that we're 50% the same as a banana. Yeah, you can break down the proteins of everything and then say, look how similar the proteins are. That wasn't, you know. And it's an interesting factoid and it's amazing technique that's used, you know, and they've developed a lot of technique, but it's you can't defend it biologically when you look at cell biology, and it's never discussed. They avoid it like the plague, except for John Perry here. He took a stab at it, but then leaped. It's, what do you call it? God of the gaps. There's this science of the gaps. Boom, just boom, it gets passed on. Boom, everyone's changed. What? So a zebra has 44 chromosomes, yet it can have offspring with horses called zebroids and zorses. Now they split 4 to 4.5 million years ago. So what? Equines don't get retroviruses that would cause the same, you know, different pathways? No. Those chromosomes, the 44 chromosomes in those zebras, exactly match the purine pyrimidine scaffold. It's a binary scaffold. It's always going to be purine to pyrimidine and pyrimidine to purine. And then when it flips for recombination, it doesn't change that. So that's what I'm saying. So after 4.5 million years, that scaffold between zebras and horses didn't modify at all. Those chromosomes completely match up, pair up, and you get a zebroid or a zorse.
So I'll send you what I'm looking at if you want. I just Googled real quick. I mean, John Perry's definitely not the only one claiming this. And then there's a slew of experiments, looks like done in the 80s and 90s, that all generated germ cell infections of these of ERVs, and they were integrated into the offspring of the
Of what?
model organisms.
Yeah, a lot of times they use single cells. That's why it's important to know if it's how does it reproduce? Because if it's sexually reproducing, that gamete to gamete meshing up is what stops the errant part of modification. It says, hey, you either belong here or you don't. So if there's a modification for sexually reproducing organisms,
we know that mutations can be inherited.
Point mutations, I believe, can be inherited, but those aren't that consequential, because it's just you're throwing in the other pyrimidine or the other purine. I mean, it's still going to function. It's maybe not the most optimal nucleotide to be there, because that's, whatever, but it still works, and maybe it's fine. I don't know. Point mutations. And sometimes there are
sometimes there's like crossover errors where like a piece of chromosome will end up on somewhere else, and
that's fine, but
it doesn't necessarily lead to infertility. As long as there's one that can break through, like most of them are.
I'm looking for examples.
Like fatal, but as long as it gets through that filter, then it can be inherited.
They didn't complete the human genome sequencing until 2022, and that was just the haploid. They said, well, we'll be done with the diploid by the end of the year. So I don't even know. So if you're reading papers before 2022 on they think they know everything, they didn't even have.
Well, you don't have to sequence the entire genome to sequence certain sections.
Well,
and part of it, like the technology's gotten faster.
Yeah, and that's the surprising part, that they haven't. This is why the whole evolution debate, and it's not evolution, it's human ape shared ancestry. This is why it hasn't gone anywhere. That's why there's no serious scientists actually pursuing it anymore. It's all YouTubers and professors holding a job, because that's what they dedicated their studies to.
It seems pretty. Where would you go from? Because humans are a form of ape. Like, what else is there to say about it other than which fossils belong where in the timeline?
See, fossils don't have DNA to compare.
Yeah,
did you read that Did you read the 1975 paper? Which
one? The one you sent me?
Yeah,
I looked for it. For some reason, I didn't see it until.
Did you see their assertion on how the chimpanzee evolved very slowly, but the human evolution was at a much, much higher rate? And they had it graphed where exactly what the common ancestor would have been more like. They say the common ancestor was more like a chimpanzee. Now, how would they know that? Do you know what part I'm talking about? That graph? It's a little. It looks like a little kind of X, but
yeah, I just saw the email, so I was skimming them while you were rebooting your computer. I'm not sure if I know what you're talking about though. But
so it was assumed back then.
Evolution, like the rate of change can depend a lot on selection factors. So if the chimps have found their ecological niche, and there's not a lot of selection going on, they're going to settle in, and basically they're not going to, if they're successful, they're not going to evolve much.
But not a
but
single
other
autosome.
species could be going through environmental changes, and they would be getting subject to a lot harsher selection, and that would show up as a high rate of change.
But they're claiming they know where the beginning was. So they're claiming they know what they're looking for. But how could they know what they're looking for?
As
What
in
if a
what
bunch
the last common ancestor was?
Well, yeah, they've got it graphed that there's a point where we branched off. You know, none of it can be true because the genomes don't align. There's no mechanism that can do what the chromosomes have done between the two species. That's why I mentioned the zebras and the horses. Because even after 4 million years, a minimum of 4 million years, those all 44 chromosomes line up. They've been different populations since the beginning of time, and they don't tend to interbreed. But when they're put in that situation where it's animal husbandry or whatever they're doing, those chromosomes are a dead-on match, and it's not true with chimpanzees at all. Not a single autosome
humans
lines
to be
up.
as similar to chimps as our modern livestock are to 40 generations. Well, I guess that's human. Like I saw some statistic that like the year 0 or like 2,000 years ago was only like 40 generations ago. I guess livestock would probably be around 10 or so times. So I don't know, 400 generations removed from domesticated wild animals, maybe more.
Yeah, it's like they used to be bison, and now they're domestic dairy cows. Whatever the common ancestor was in the past. Because you can take a bison and a beef cattle and get a beefalo. It's the same animal. It's actually the same animal. Oh, and that's the other thing about racism, where they actually call an Asian elephant and an African elephant two different species. Okay, no, it's the same animal. It's just a different population of the same animal, and they proved that in 1978 with the birth of Maudie. Maudie was an Asian African hybrid, and so they want to call them two different species. It's like, no, they didn't even want to call them sister species. Not at all. Just they're two different populations. You could call them a different race, but that's been the claim. And I think I heard Erica say it not too long ago, like mention that Asian and African elephants can't not interbreed. They're repeating this stuff like, no, not true. Yes, they can. It's the same animal. So that kind of stuff, it's like straw man stuff, though. And that's why when people make their claims of how this genome gets modified, because that's the story we're told. We're not told a story about human and ape ancestry that says, over time, the natural selection of these ape-like creatures, and because of our environment, we got more and more intelligent because the dumb people that branched off from chimpanzees died out because they were too dumb. We're not told that story about natural selection, that how we came from apes. We're told there were some radical modifications to the genome and poof, no. Where? How? There's not even a possibility of describing a mechanism like that. So,
well, they're a lot dumber creatures than humans, and they survive. So it's probably not the biggest reason. They might have been outcompeted by us.
Whatever it is,
if we're better strategic thinkers, and
chimpanzees win with violence.
Like a hominid that can create spears versus humans that can create spears, and one's just more tactical, they're gonna wipe out the ones that are less tactically minded.
Right, but that's not a commentary on the story we've been told for decades about how we share a common ancestor because telomeres fused, and that automatically got put into a new population, and poof, there was a human. And it just took
Well,
a while because
that would have probably taken place before anything human-like.
so okay, telomeric fusions,
Like the Neanderthals had that.
that was another population of human beings.
Yeah.
You can't have Neanderthal genes in you and think, oh, that was a different species. That's like, what are those little goat men? You're half goat, half man. Like, no, that doesn't happen.
Well, you can
If you have
crossbreed species.
what? You're abusing the word species then.
I mean, it's a pretty nebulous term, but that's
Yeah,
because you
exactly.
can't draw a line between organisms because they're all related.
Well, there you go. See, that's the ideology.
But
Me in the
where
cell
should you
biology.
draw a line, though?
Yeah, and I know you want to know the limitations. I don't know how to answer that question.
Well,
Only
yeah,
to say
no
that
one does because it's
it's
arbitrary.
yeah, it's limited by the ecosystem as far as they tell us.
Yeah, sometimes it's ecosystem, and sometimes it's like an actual inability to breed. Like there's like most of the foxes have different numbers of chromosomes. I don't think they can interbreed.
They found a fox hybrid, a fox dog hybrid, because they're basically canines.
That's like rumor. I tried to confirm that.
Yeah, you saw the story though.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in Mexico.
But foxes crossing with foxes, they have like different numbers of chromosomes.
I haven't done a deep dive on all of that. That's why I want to focus on the cell biology. The one thing that's holding evolution back is that they won't address that, and they have all the tools right now.
So what's up, Richard? Good to see you again. He likes interbreedability as a metric, and the problem with that is there's no way to account for species that may have once been able to interbreed and cannot now, because that can happen.
You're talking about ring species, because that's not true. When they say they cannot breed, it's the actual truth is they do not breed. It's not cannot, because if you like in the ring species of Loloris gull, and they say there's 7 different populations when you go around the Arctic Circle, and all of them can interbreed with each other, but the first population doesn't interbreed with the 7th population. But they'll write that they cannot interbreed, which is just an abuse of the word cannot. Well, it turns out that the 2 populations of gulls sing a different song and have a different culture. So when they're calling out, they don't respond to each other. So they're not. That's how you nest. Is that first you call out and you talk to each other, and they don't. So because they speak a different language. So I liken it to Yao Ming and a pygmy woman. You'll never see Yao Ming driving his Ferrari down the highway with a pygmy woman sitting in the passenger seat. But they could. They could have offspring, but an evolutionist would find their remains and say, these are 2 different species. And where I'm protesting, no, it's the same exact organism. So you're being racist when you say when you're segregating by species. You're saying this is a different species, which is
Well, that's not racist to say that there is a difference.
Yeah.
We could have aliens that are completely unrelated to us visit us, and we can give them full human rights based on their intelligence, but saying that they're a different species is not racist.
Well, just by segregating the population is a racist notion. It doesn't mean you hate them.
You wouldn't have to segregate them.
Yeah, in the Asian and the African elephant example, they will say these are 2 different species of elephant. No, it's the same elephant. They're 2 different populations. It's racist. It's a racist notion. Doesn't mean you hate elephants. You've segregated based on phenotypical, things. You're saying this is a different population.
Well,
they're a separate
different.
Group.
The Asian elephants don't have
geographically
the same tusk as African elephants.
So that's a variation. They're just
Yeah,
geographically
but you can
separated,
label that
and they've
category,
adapted to
right?
their ecosystems.
Why wouldn't you point out that there is a difference?
They're not. They're not. Um, they're not profound differences. There's nothing profound to label them different species.
Well, it's profound enough that poachers don't hunt the Asian ones for their tusks.
Well, that's less tusk material because African elephants are larger. I don't
Yeah.
know. That's a funny
like-
rationale.
So with horses and zebras and donkeys, like, are they the same animal?
Yes, they're the same animal in in different stages of chromosomal loss. And so what's amazing about that are the 44 chromosomes in zebras have a backup plan for if they did lose those other 20. Compared to horses are 64. There is the wild horse. It's some kind of a Polish Przewski's horse. It's a wild horse with 66 chromosomes, and as far as we know, that's the mother horse. And then they say that zebras split from horses. We don't know that. They could have split from the horse that has 66 chromosomes, and it could have been one act of some kind of radioactive particle that smashed, and separated some chromosomes, but the other chromosomes still made an animal, which is amazing because that means that all the redundancies that they talk about kicked in and made an animal. So that's why some animals have a whole bunch of chromosomes, so it can tolerate the loss. And all of my life, they were talking about junk DNA, and now, because it doesn't code, they don't witness it coding. I'm not sure how they figure that out, but
So you're accepting a degree of anti-fragility with horses, but not in humans.
I don't know. I don't know what would happen
Because
if
this
you
is the
knocked
point.
out.
It's like even within zebras, there are different species of zebra that have different numbers of
Yes,
chromosomes.
That's true. I'm talking about the one with
And
44.
and they have a different chromosome number from
Yeah.
horses, but they were once the same kind, which could interbreed.
They're all the same kind, just in different states of chromosomal loss.
So
yeah.
that's why you can't use current interbreedability as a metric for species, is because they once had a different ability to interbreed than they do now.
A different ability to interbreed.
Or they once didn't exist because they were the same species or whatever.
It became a birds of the feather flock together situation where, the horses are being racist.
Well, nature is kind of racist.
Yeah, it is.
They're they see something different and they get their hackles up.
Yeah. Isn't it sad?
Early humans and chimpanzees are very tribal. They'll have wars with different tribes of chimps.
I know.
They'll have civil wars.
I don't like it.
They'll hate
each other.
So smart. They'll hate each other based on which alpha male some of them follow.
Yeah.
And they'll know, like, you're following that guy and we hate that guy, so we hate you too.
They just don't have God in their lives.
Well,
There's a higher authority.
God can motivate people to act pretty similarly.
What exactly? But we're supposed to be on our spirit journey, and you're supposed to make it to old age so you can temper your soul and it's ready. So this lack of forward thinking causes the violence. So everyone needs to think about their existence and what the truth of that is, because if you've been lied to, I say seek further.
So this is like why, like with most, I guess we'll go Ligers. I've looked into a little bit more. Some of them
definitely
aren't infertile. There have been a couple of them that were fertile.
The females, they say,
I think, yeah. So there's an ability for a chromosome mismatch to actually still produce fertile
Separate.
offspring, and they might actually be a little unhealthy for a couple generations, and then
That I'm not.
we've shown, and then
I'm
they
fine with
keep
that.
breeding with healthier and healthier ones, and
I'm fine with that.
so, but you're saying that humans, or I guess primitive apes, couldn't have underwent a slight genome modification with the addition of a retrovirus,
They couldn't have.
even though other organisms have survived with much greater chromosomal aberrations passed
I
down.
need examples because I haven't found them. I find examples of the opposite.
Well, if horses, zebras, and donkeys are all the same kind, then they've had much more drastic chromosomal
No,
deletions or additions or
no, that's my
structural
point.
changes.
That's my point, is that the binary scaffold of purines and pyrimidines was conserved after 4 million years of split. So there were no retrovirus insertions and any other explanation that could explain why human and ape chromosome DNA is shifted apart. The coding ranges are not purine pyrimidine matched up like they are in, human to human or zebra to horse in the 44 that remain from, I don't know about the fertility of zebroids and zorses because I looked for papers on it, and the only thing there is the claim that they wouldn't be, but that's a general term. I don't do, equine experiments, and they probably are making them illegal, like biomedical experiments on great apes is illegal. So try doing you ever heard of the Human Z experiments in the Soviet Union?
Yeah,
They tried to do that. They tried to see if a pregnancy would take, or if any of the chromosomes would pair up, and zero, nada. So by 1970, that came out in the 90s. We didn't know they did that in the Soviet Union. That was a glasnost perestroika thing, where they, after the Soviet Union fell, they purged their whatever records, and that was part of it, that they did that experiment. And in 1975, we didn't know that they even tried that. So that's the paper on what is it called? Let's see, I was on my other Evolution at Two Levels from 1975. Evolution at Two Levels in Humans and Chimpanzees. I mean, just, it's 1975. They don't even have the fish mapping yet. They just took the proteins, dissolved them out, and electrophoretically, compared human proteins and chimp proteins, and said, wow, there's an amazing similarity on the level of how many of these and how many of those. Even though the proteins themselves weren't dead on matches, they're similar. That's where the 98.7 or 98.6, whatever, figure comes from. So, cell biology, explain how that happens based on sexually reproducing gametes, because he claims it. He says it goes into a sperm cell, and then every person in the next forever inherits that, and then he'll run on and never explain how that could possibly be true.
I mean, yeah, he doesn't get into the details of that. Let's see if we can look up the experiments.
Help me, everybody. Help me figure out why I'm wrong. Because I've been looking for it on, that's what I wasn't thinking about. I haven't had that moment yet.
I mean, I wouldn't expect it to be in this video.
But he makes that assertion, and then a lot of people are listening, and they're running with it, and they'll refer to that as their source of information.
So
they'll
your
say,
claim,
you better watch this video. It gets inserted, then everybody gets it. Like, okay, but what about the cell biology? It has to go through mitosis.
So is your claim that once the germ cell is infected, it cannot?
If you if you put an
They
insertion,
fertilize.
yeah, it's going to throw off the pairing once that gamete meets the other gamete.
But how
It's
do you
going to
know
look
that?
for its. I'm asking for the experiment. I'm saying, hey, why don't you guys take a gamete, insert a retrovirus-sized insertion into it, and then artificial insemination, and watch. Does it take? And if it takes, does that insertion get passed on? And would that lead to a new population? But I don't even think it'll take. So that's where I'm challenging. Will it take? Will it pair? Will it even pair? And then you'd have to make the population genetics argument after that if it got passed on. If it got passed on to an individual, that guy is now sterile because that would be in his what do you call it, stem cell, which is where the germline comes from, because that's where the differentiation starts. So he would have a chromosome permanently offset from the rest of the population. Prove it. Where's the experiment?
But we know that things can reproduce with minor to major chromosomal differences.
I'm with Dr. Bergman. I haven't seen
like the horses and zebras.
So they're
like how would a horse split into a zebra if that wasn't happening?
I imagined that radiation, cosmic radiation, hit the upper atmosphere, hit a hydrogen ion, and that broke up into muons, and muons are highly energetic penetrating particles. They can penetrate up to 10 meters into rock, and what if right at the moment of conception it goes boom through the zygote, right, knocked out 22 chromosomes, and somehow miraculously the chromosomes decided, hey, we're together, we're functional, let's turn on, let the regulatory part of these remaining chromosomes turn on the dormant parts that would make an animal. That's just my imagination though. But because it didn't damage any of the original 44. It just knocked out 22 somehow. And that's just a scenario. I'm not claiming it. I don't know. Maybe it was something genotoxic that the one of the parents got into, and it affected, something genotoxic knocked out some of the chromosomes. I don't know. Well water can have, arsenic. I mean, zebras aren't digging wells. Horses aren't digging wells, but when water gets low, you could get some kind of dissolved mineral contamination. Who knows?
Okay, so what I'm reading there, this is like experiment 3 of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or 11 experiments that are cited in a claim in a paper that says that endogenous retroviruses arise by the infection of germ cells or their precursors. So the one that I'm currently on talks about infecting a embryo that's already growing, but it looks like they're saying that once this embryo grew and all the somatic tissues proliferated, then they were able to reproduce with this ERV infection and hand that down to their offspring. So what if instead of infecting a germ cell, an ape embryo was infected and that ape was born and then reproduced?
Well, I'd like to read the study. because a
Yeah,
lot of
I'll
them
send you all of that.
they're trying to find a mechanism, so they're they approach it with high confidence because that they have to.
Well, it's
So
because
I definitely
it's
want to read
obvious
what
that they
this-
are retroviruses, so you don't necessarily need to know how it happens to know that it did happen. Like
Well, I'd like to
if
know
someone
what
was murdered,
I
like
want to know what organism they were using or what model they were using because a lot of
that
them
was
use
mice.
it was a mouse.
Yeah,
Okay, I think I may have read something about that, but
I
I
think all of
also
these are on mice.
I also found a flaw that I could point out that I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but a mouse. Okay. Oh, I think I remember that wasn't a long-term study. So that's why I said you have to get into the population genetics.
Sure, but they
Was it
were
a
able to reproduce.
Well, if they pass it on to an offspring, then what's the chances of that offspring creating a new population of mice that that has a claim that it's ever going to be anything else but a mouse that can't populate with the other mice? So what would it have to do? It would have to The first child would have to have sex with its own mother. So the first child would have had to been a male, and then it would have to have sex.
No, I don't think they did that with
No, the
these
population
mice.
genetics has to work out. So they inserted that, okay, and watched it in a lab condition, right? But did they study it how it would happen in the wild? What would happen in the wild? So there's this anomaly born, and so there's the parents. That anomaly that was born, okay, so it's only the other parent. It's only one of the parents, you're saying, because that's it's a gamete insertion. It's a random gamete insertion in one of the parents, because that's the nature of evolution. Random, mutations that accumulate and end up something good, right? So
I
one
only
of the
have access
parents,
to the abstract, so I don't know. I'd have to
exact. That's
look
another
more into
thing.
that.
It's always behind a paywall. So
I can use. I have my ways, but
okay,
I'm just going through these quickly, just
I forgive a lot of them.
because it's
They're
more
looking for
complex than you're
mechanisms.
saying.
It's more. No, it's not.
It's not
Actually, this
just
is
like if there is a
no.
change in the
This is why
chromosome, that thing is dead and can't reproduce.
I want to bring it down to everyone's level that's accessible, because this is the main hurdle that has not been overcome. That's why it's very important, and that's exactly why they jump. They leap out of it because they know this is in everyone's hand. That they can all look at this and say, "Oh, hey, wait a minute. Chromosomes work like a lock and key. If you add a section to your key, if you add a little more, couple of sawtooths in there, your key is not going to work in your tumbler anymore." So they understand that if you insert something on one side that's supposed to be in mesh with the other side, you've offset it, and something's going to go wrong. It's not something that should get passed on. It throws off recombination completely, because they have to break, the chromatids have to break at the same exact point. Now they communicate that with each other, and it's not always the same point on the chromosome that breaks. It's random where it breaks. It's actually freaking amazing. So you shift one of the chromosomes a little bit, you've completely ruined recombination.
That doesn't seem to be the case.
Well,
And in
I'd
this,
like to read that, because who's to say that they didn't insert on both sides? Does it explicitly state that they inserted only on one gamete? Because you
no,
can
but
do it. You can modify to
this
both
one looks like
gametes.
it's talking about specifically meiosis
Yeah.
of infected chromosomes, and the crossover, and it does happen. copies are lost or gained.
I'm highly skeptical.
All right. Well, read through that one.
Okay.
There's a few. I'll send you all of these. Just
Awesome.
this is just what I'm getting, so that I'm not like totally checked out during the stream. So, did you want to keep going on the stated clearly, or was that kind of what you wanted to talk about?
Well, what he does. See, I don't mind anybody doing this, but don't make it a conclusion. Don't say we know this. Say it's a work in progress, because the bottom line is it's a work in progress. So keep looking. Go ahead. I'm all for it. I tell everybody I'm a secular humanist who believes that God sent his only begotten son to help tell us the truth.
Well, you can be a secular humanist and a Christian. They're not.
Yeah.
Secular is misused a lot.
I don't buy into this argument that religious people are out to get everybody. You know, there have been those times in history, but it's completely like an irrational fear. It's just whatever. I mean, you're kidding me. No, we're the ones that you're safe with, because we have an enforced ethic. We're not allowed to kill you. We're not allowed to lie. We're not allowed to steal. Okay, so sure, there's infiltrators who are frauds, but our ethic? You're worried about us? What? No, drop that. We're your friends.
So what if ERVs aren't able to infect and proliferate? If you don't, so let's say this, if you don't think that they are viral infections, what do you think that they are?
Well, you're going on an assumption. The entire thing's an assumption.
Or are you just saying that you don't know?
Well, I don't know, but the reason they need ERV theory is to explain why the coding regions are offset. That's the only thing they can think of. So it's like it becomes a straw.
Well, it wasn't invented ad hoc just to explain that.
I think it was.
Let's see here.
So why didn't it happen in horses? They should have completely had
what happened in horses?
There's no ERV insertion in horses.
What do you mean?
There are no
horses don't have any ERV sequences?
Nope.
Let's just Google that.
They need ERV theory to explain why the ape and human genomes are completely whack-a-mole different.
Well, I found a paper that's called The Identification and Expression Analyses of Equine Endogenous Retroviruses in Horses.
Read it. See, that's title searching. Read it, and
that's how I find it.
Okay, but I'll tear it apart. If I read it, I'll say, okay, look what they did. Here's what they did. Now you're believing the title, but did you see what they did and how that doesn't work?
Well, the only claim I'm looking for right now is that horses have ERVs.
Oh, can you chat that link? You could throw that link in the chat, no?
Here, I'll put it in the stream chat.
Yeah.
The StreamYard chat between us. The private chat, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I heard you right. You said that horses don't have ERVs?
Nope.
At all?
Nope, because if they did, the 44 chromosomes wouldn't pair up. Because the purine pyrimidine scaffold, it's a binary scaffold that's conserved, would have shifted, and no animal could have been created with the 44 chromosomes that remained. So a zebra with the 44 mates with a horse that has 64, and the 44 chromosomes go into the zebroid or the zors. which means they're all completely aligned. Now they could actually lose more because there are zebras with less, you know, so. Tell me how, after 4 million years, there are 44 chromosomes that line up still. That's not even mathematically possible. Everything supposedly has a rate of mutation, and those were two separate populations.
We don't know. The ancestral horse might have had a different number of chromosomes, just like horses and zebras and donkeys all have different number of chromosomes.
Yeah. So, but it's going to be the one with the most. It's going to be the one with the most.
All foxes have different chromosomes. Well, not all, but most of them have different chromosomes.
The progenitor of all horse species would have the most chromosomes. So a horse can't come from a donkey. A donkey has to come from somewhere below, you know, below the number of original chromosomes. And like I say, the Perwisky's horse, what's the horse with 66 chromosomes? I can't say that word. Przewalski's horse. It's a wild horse. It kind of has a donkey look, but right now that's the master. That's the master genome where all of the other equines came from. Now it's not necessarily true, but you could assume it and be safe as far as, you know, genetics goes.
So
but there may be an extinct equine that had, you know, 80 freaking chromosomes. We don't know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, is that rule broken for the proposed human evolution?
What do you mean?
Isn't it a chromosomal fusion, and so we're getting less chromosomes?
Okay, so the telomeric fusion usually happens in aging somatic cells. So the claim is the same claim, that it would have had to happen in a gamete in order for it to be heritable, because telomeric fusions in somatic cells are inconsequential to any offspring. You don't pass those on. Okay, so you're saying that a gamete that had a telomeric fusion went into zygosis with, I mean, have you looked at the karyotypes of each creature? The claim is that the ape chromosome 12 and 13 fused. They've relabeled it 2A and 2B, okay? But they're saying, no, this was chromosome 12 and 13 that fused and became a homologue to the human 2, okay? But when it fused, it still had its centromeres, okay? The story itself is horse shit, actually, because chromosomes align centromere to centromere. That's for the first place that they align. So if you've got a telomeric fusion in a gamete, you know, and you've seen what an actual chromosome looks like. It looks like an X, but you'll see all these banding technique illustrations of them where it's just like a little worm. No, they look like X's, and the X is formed because there's a centromere. And you're saying the telomeres fused, but the centromeres actually still created a heritable trait in a chromosome that couldn't possibly align with it. Okay, so the proof back then, when I was coming up and they were telling me, oh, it was 1982. That's the Prakash and Eunice paper, okay, where they try to describe that telomeric fusion, and the evidence that was already false was in Cell Biology to begin with. It was already debunked the moment they said it, but I didn't know anything back then. I thought, well, it's possible, you know, but, you know, studying biology at the university, I'm like, okay, so it's very conservative, actually. This thing's really, like, it doesn't like to make any kind of mistakes. It doesn't want to pass them on. So it's got this mechanism, and that's what sexual reproduction does, and blah, 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 blah. And I didn't care. But in 2009, I'm on YouTube, and there's this explosion of interest in Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. so people started talking about it, and I was like back to being novice kind of about it, and it was the evolutionists that were teaching me a ton of stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, and then like, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. It's so blatantly false. It cannot get passed on. Cannot. The fusion theory is garbage. And guess what? I looked up Om Prakash. There's J.J. Yunus, and the other guy is Om Prakash. And if it's the same Om Prakash that's of he's a molecular, some kind of molecular biochemical molecular, I don't know. He's like very educated. He's distanced himself from that 1982 paper. He doesn't mention it in his CV. He's got a CV out there. If that's the same guy, because he was active in the 70s, throughout the 70s and beyond, and even recently, and he does not list that paper. So either he's sick of talking about it, or he's actually ashamed of it. So I don't know. That's just what I thought when I saw. Why aren't you including that? This could be a different Om Prakash, but I don't think so. I could pull that up too if you're ever interested in seeing that. That's something weird. If anybody knows Om Prakash, we could ask him. Maybe I'll try that next.
Yeah. So I'm gonna send you something that I'm gonna read as well. It might be a good resource.
Okay.
I'll post the title in the YouTube chat. Talking about chromosomal fusions and that's happened to this family of fishes multiple times. Might be interesting to look into. Or I'll put it back up. I just like to gather lots of resources.
Well, that's fine, because they're trying to piece together and they're trying to look for a mechanism. But my pushback is, do it for humans. We're the topic. It's interesting it happened in some algae. It's interesting it happened in this fish. But show me how it happened in humans, because fish are, they lay like 1,000 eggs, and who knows, and then they spray, they kind of cloud it with sperm. It's a different system. We work on a single gamete model, so because they find it in a different reproductive method organism. Explain how it happens between humans and chimps. Then it should be easy if you've got it all. Well, we have a yeast that we made, and we turn it into a single chromosome,
right? Just on the cellular level, the chromosomes
that's
are
fine with the concept, but show me that if this concept is true, how that works in our scenario. Should be easy.
So DNA can do it. It's just that you have doubts about whether DNA can do it in human cells.
Yeah, no, you can modify a haploid. The question is, that haploid now heritable into a population? Because you could say, well, yeah, it did get passed on to an offspring. Look, here, it's alive. Well, we don't know any adverse long-term effects, but if it did get passed on, now that individual has a newly shaped and lengthed chromosome that wouldn't be compatible with the rest of the homologs in the entire population of all females. So how would it continue? Well, I guess it could have sex with its parent, but doesn't that also lead to problems? Besides, the parent's infection was from an infected gamete, not all the other gametes. One got infected, and in sperm, you got 200 million sperm per milliliter or whatever, centiliter. 200 million sperm per centiliter. And we're talking about one gamete. And it got through. Wow, it got through. Oh, wow, it even made a baby. Oh, wow, the baby has that heritable freaking consequence. Oh, wow, that baby's sterile, at least for that one chromosome. So it can't pass on its 46 chromosomes. It could possibly pass over 44 because maybe it'll lead to a chromosomal loss and we'll have an interesting new being. Let's see how it expresses itself, like horses and zebras making zebroids, you know? But no, none of that. I get 0. Help me. Help. I'm thirsty for this intriguing conversation. It doesn't work. The cell biology will not allow it. How do the centromeres line up in a telomeric fusion? You've got 2 centromeres and the telomeres are fused, but you only got 1 centromere on the original. What they're saying it made it up to. They won't align. And they certainly won't turn into what they are today. There's no random. And I'm with Dr. James Tour, where he says it's a mystery. The origins of life are a mystery, and I'm fine with that. Which is why I'd ask evolutionists to claim we think this is what's going on. It's a work in progress.
Well, that's all of science, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but you know they have their punishing moments where they don't allow dissent. Like Bergman was talking to Donnie the other day, or he was talking to Dr. Dan, and he was talking about one of his colleagues that wrote a paper about how eukaryotes couldn't have possibly evolved from prokaryotes. They fired her. They didn't address it. It's like, well, but it could, and here's why. You know, they didn't do it the normal, intellectually honest way. And Dr. Dan said that, well, we have to operate within a high degree of confidence. We have to really, really believe what we're telling you so that we can continue. That's so. It's amazing to me that he thought that was okay. That's so intellectually dishonest. But he was honest. He's being honest. He's telling the truth. Like, well, yeah. Well, you know, he's trying to say, well, I wouldn't have fired her, but you know, we have to we have to be confident in what we're telling you. Why? It's a science. It's either true or not true.
So, I mean, you accept that organisms with chromosomes that don't align perfectly can reproduce, right?
I don't know. I'm asking for the experiment. What's the average length of a retrovirus? Let's insert that into a chromosome of a gamete, and then use artificial insemination to.
Well, we can't.
Meet up with.
It appears as if that's been done, but
I was reading that stuff. I never saw it. Let's see it. The appearance. You know, it's the man behind the curtain.
Well,
you know,
based on my light rating and I'll send you the meta study that I got it from. Based on the experts' reading of all those experiments, that's their conclusion as well. That's been done. Where was I going with that?
Well, it's a quick judgment to make, but that's all right. That's where we're at. That's why we started talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, we can always come back to this.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, like I said, I just now got your the papers that you wanted to send, and I didn't know exactly what
those are the biggest. This is why some of us older, you know, people. So we were told this all our lives. We were being shown that the evolution thing where first it starts out like a monkey, and then it's a small ape, and then the ape gets bigger, and then it's a caveman, and then, you know, we start to stand upright, and then it's modern man. We were shown that. It was like, it was a joke to me. I thought, oh, that's funny. We used to be cavemen, but they hammered us with that. Like, they were serious. I looked at it like it was funny, but they were dead serious. And I'm like, wow, they're serious. They think that we've branched off from a population of something that was very chimpanzee-like. And Gutsick Gibbon has it on her YouTube page. It's got basically the same progression where a monkey turns into a man, So, like, they've made that up. It's a complete fabrication. So that 75 paper shows you where it's propaganda. It's really propaganda. Where that propaganda came from and what they were teaching people. So it's very assumptive, and it does not address the requirement that biology has for the purine pyrimidine lattice, binary lattice required of your genome, your germline.
Send me any papers you have on that claim.
Okay.
I'd
But
be
that's
interested to read more
that's
into
how
that.
meiosis works. That's how meiosis and mitosis works. It makes mistakes, but the mistakes
it's
are
not
addressed.
a foolproof.
It makes mistakes, but those aren't heritable. And if they're heritable, it's because now you have some kind of genetic anomaly that's not an evolutionary driver. It would be a detriment. It would be an extinction level direction. That's a fail. That was one of the failures. Oh, they're failures. There's no doubt they're failures, but they're not evolutionary drivers. It's the opposite.
So, and what if the answer is actually that there was a son to mother or sibling incest?
Yeah.
What if that happened in one generation or maybe a couple times, and then they contacted other tribes and
I'd be
spread
curious.
the problems out?
Yeah, I'd be curious if that's a
possible.
possibility. I just don't. I'm not smart enough to do the population genetics, or if that would actually cause, because they say that incest will lead to. Well, we know it leads
persistently.
To,
I mean, it takes a few generations. You have to be pretty dedicated.
Yeah, but early genomes, maybe they were a lot tougher, and like, what is it? The royal family that has a high rate of what is that? Hemophilia because of inbreeding, incest, whatever. So they inherited a bad thing because of that. It's blamed on that. I don't know.
They can still reproduce, and they can breed back in. They can breed with normal people, and then over time those children will be normal.
But they have the normal people to rely on.
Yeah.
This new population of mice or whatever, who knows? What they only have themselves. So I don't know about the population genetics of that, but it's possible. Like I say, the genome may have been a lot tougher back then.
I mean, like a lot of stuff, there's like so many possibilities that we don't know exactly what happened, but it could have happened a lot of different ways.
Yay! You said it. You said we don't know. That's all I'm asking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we don't know. And James Tour agrees. He says it's a mystery.
Possibilities. Possible that it happened this way. It's possible that it happened that way.
Okay, that's fine. They're mean. They get mean about it. They don't say, well, we think so. They don't. They hammer it like, you're an idiot if you don't agree. I was like, no, that's tyranny, man. You got to give us our freedom. Yeah.
So did you want to transition kind of into like where the limits of phenotypic changes would be?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I say, you got Yao Ming, who's like, what is he, 7'4" or something?
Mm-hmm.
He's like 7'4", and then you got a pygmy woman. They're like under 5 feet tall. So why? Well, I don't know.
Variation.
Yeah, but they did. Is that evolution?
It's an ingredient.
It's some kind of adaptation. So we're all on the same planet, though. I mean, the north is cold and the temperate regions grow food all year. So you're gonna get different characteristics. Like in the north, if you don't can your food during the summer, you're gonna die in the winter, right? But in the temperate zones, the sun's always there to grow food, and it's a lot of rain, and So yeah, you're gonna get some kind of phenotypical and behavioral differences. We're the same species though. Absolutely 100% the same exact genome, the same. Oh, yeah, the genomic changes. That's kind of a thing where we waffle on. People say the genome changes. Well, the genome doesn't change. No, it's the same genome. It's just the combinations get shifted horizontally. The combination for that, and that's what causes the variation. So when I, that's the claim we kind of butted heads on, I think. I'm asking, what do you mean by genome changes? And then you were saying, well, when a cat has kittens, each kitten has a changed genome. But then you'll backpedal. I'm not saying backpedal. I'm saying you'll correct yourself in a different statement and saying, no, it doesn't change the genomic structure at all. It's just, and then you go on to describe natural selection based on the ecosystem. So
Well,
it's
yeah,
being
genomic
loose with the
structure would be
language.
more of like the genomic structure would be like the model genome that's similar across all of the species, whereas each individual has a different genome.
It's not a different genome. It's the same genome.
Same genome structure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a different sequence of alleles and active alleles. What are the dominant? There's the whole Mendelian dominant recessive, features of that, whatever colors of flowers he studied. What's this? Oh yeah, that. I saw that one. You're talking about the toes and stuff, how it turned into a foot.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
What type of change do you think is not possible?
Is
it possible for like a fossil? So this is a fossil horse here on the left, and it has 4 toes. Is it possible for its ancestors to have smaller toes? Except for its middle toe, the rest are smaller.
What's the claim here? Are they trying to say that that's the same animal that changed over time? Because one of them
all
looks like an
creationist
ostrich.
organizations accept that the Hyracotherium is a fossil horse. I'm not saying you do or you have to, but every creationist organization I've ever seen accepts that fossil horse as part of the horse kind and related to modern horses.
Okay.
But if you look at their feet, the fossil horse has 4 toes and the modern horse has 1 toe.
Okay.
But it has, you can find evidence of the extra toe bones up higher in the modern horse's leg. And we have fossil evidence of horses that have increasingly smaller side toes and larger middle toes up into the current time. So the question I'd have is it possible for, say, the fossil horse, so-called, to have ancestors that have smaller side toes and a larger middle toe? Is that within the variation that's possible within a single kind?
Well, assuming that those are the bones. See, they don't have any DNA evidence for one, and I'm not trying to dismiss this because I'm fine with that being the same exact animal if they could prove that over time, first you'd have to look at the ecosystems that each one of those creatures came from. So that, how would you determine that? Because there have been so many Earth changes. So I don't know the dates when those were found, and it looks like it's a progression. Like it was used to be a foot, and now it's a hoof. And they've got this graph, and it looks logical to the unassuming person that see the progression here. It even has a line that goes up.
Well, yeah,
And so
because the
there's
I mean, this is just an elongation of the
there's
homologous bones, like this.
I can't see the bottom part. It looks like there's numbers there. Is that a timeline?
So the bottom part is years, and the top line is just height.
So the bottom is a historical based on how many centuries or years
How
ago.
old the rock is that they were found in.
Okay, so it is a dating thing. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, that's fine. And they're
So
saying
like
that
basically they're saying that on the top that the wrist bones are all the same, except the that middle digit bone is getting longer the more modern the horses are, and the rest of the skeleton is basically exactly the same, except for the feet.
Just looking at that, I'd say the first one would be more adapted to a marshy, loamy kind of soil, and the last one is more adapted to, desert, more of a, well, out here in Nevada, you see the wild horses, and they have that kind of hoof. But there's a timeline too. So we're talking about ecosystem changes that I don't know about.
Yeah. So I mean, just in your opinion, is it possible that
Yeah,
the
I don't
difference
have a
between
problem with
this
that.
first one and the second one, that's limited limited variation.
So
right?
the first one can breed with the last one. It will just produce an animal that doesn't have a niche because it'll have a foot that's not the first one and not the last one. It'll have some modification of that somehow, however the alleles end up expressing themselves. And where it's born, that won't be the matching niche.
Okay.
Because
I
it
mean,
doesn't have a niche. It would be a brand new hybrid that you'd have to take care of probably because its feet aren't adapted to where the latest situation is.
So like little variations within kind can.
Oh yeah.
So the middle finger of this organism is essentially adapted to be an entire foot in its ancestor.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know any better.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
is that too far of a? Is
Would
that
you
within the limits that you accept?
would you pay Albert Einstein to watch him play basketball? Would you ask Shaquille O'Neal to calculate trajectories to Mars? They're both the same human. So I don't have a problem with vastly different things in the same kind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just another example. These are all the same species having different bone structure. This one has to do with number of bones and the location of those bones. So it's possible for the same kind of animal to duplicate basically bones that they already have information for, right?
They're anomalous but inconsequential in the context of the description of our lineage with great apes. That I've been told for decades that I considered, I thought, well, maybe. And then later, like, no, that's not even possible. I know I keep saying that, but I repeat myself. I'm known as a parrot.
But so you would agree that it's possible for some animal ancestor to have descendants that have a different number of spinal vertebra and ribs, right?
Yeah.
And different
Those are anomalies. So.
Different functions to their
But it's
foot
still the same.
bones, and there's that again.
Still the same animal.
Okay.
Didn't diverge.
And what about like muscle groups? Would you agree that the same kind can have a
Variation in muscles?
yeah, like one has
Sure.
a different.
Yeah. Some contortionists, like especially these females, they can wrap their back all the way down over and look through their legs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I was never built to be able to do anything like that. But there's a girl that I could have as my wife who can. Don't
Yeah.
ask me, you know. We're very, very funny and weird. You know, we're in a weird circumstance on this strange planet. There's no doubt.
So these are all Answers in Genesis says these are all this part of the same biblical kind. So this kind of variation is accepted by them.
I would just ask them to do the genomic comparison. Is it the same chromosomes, or at any level? You know, if there are lesser numbers, do the remaining chromosomes pair up?
Well, they say all foxes are the same kind, but foxes have different numbers of chromosomes that don't pair up.
You know, that needs to be investigated. I don't think it needs to be investigated, actually. I just want to focus on the pan troglodyte versus Homo sapien. I really think these are side issues, and they don't. That's my main complaint, and that's why I'm so glad you invited me on here to
Okay.
talk about the cell biology required to make the scenario that we've been told for decades of how we came from a population of chimpanzee-like common ancestors that, by the way, had 48 chromosomes, just like the current extant apes. Same 48 chromosomes. They're not saying it. They say that one of them got modified and passed on. That's their story. They don't tell the story of
Well, it's
natural
interesting
selection.
because just now when I was looking up earlier, I'm seeing lots of stuff about how chromosomal fusion actually is helpful in separating a population from its parent population, and so
It's a
maybe the
very
reason humans are so different is because of that chromosomal fusion, and that allowed humans to not, at least the human lineage, to
it would
not
have
be able to
never.
back populate with other apes, and that allowed them to kind of go in their separate niche. So that's an interesting thing to look into. So the picture I have up here is like essentially the same skeleton. There's a little bit of difference in rib number, probably vertebra number, but the really only difference is like the length of the skull. And like, so is that something that you'd say is like a variation that can occur within a kind?
Well, we're looking at bones here. We're not. We can't get a genomic. We can't sequence and do any kind of actual comparison.
Well,
Just
I mean,
we're back to talking about shapes.
for the
Okay.
purpose of like what I'm getting at is like it doesn't even matter if they're actually related. It's just like, are they potentially? Is this a type of change that can occur within a
Well,
kind?
we can't ignore the word ancestry. Ancestor. You know, it means that someone begat something in someone. You know, it's
That's
a
fine.
lineage. It's a birth. There's a pregnancy involved.
But
Okay,
like
so I can't.
we see this kind of difference in elongation within dogs. So isn't it possible in other organisms?
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, if you want to look at, if you study birds have incredibly diverse genomes, but whatever their niche is, they all decided to be weird, small, flapping wing, flying, feathered creatures. Vastly different genomes, you know. It's amazing. So, but even birds still have to go through that same DNA regulation of gametic exchange and recombination.
So for you, would you accept, like, you could accept a large amount of phenotypic variation as long as there's nothing weird happening in the chromosome structure?
Yeah. Yeah.
So just like thought experiment. So we don't have access to the DNA of these organisms.
Mm-hmm.
So just thought experiment, assume that there's no chromosomal structure change. Is any difference between them like a red flag, like that couldn't have come about by variation of structures that were already present in the genome?
I'm going to say I don't know. I don't know.
But nothing jumps out at you like there's no way that their shoulder blade could have rotated slightly backwards or something like that.
I smell what you're cooking, but I don't know. And
But there's no obvious no.
no, I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't say
Okay.
no way. No, I'm open-minded, but
Okay.
if that was the same creature, actually, they could mate and have a have an offspring that wouldn't have a niche, because it would have, it might survive, but it wouldn't be optimal for its niche, and it would probably be eaten by something because it doesn't have the appropriate, it would be too slow in water and too slow on land. It would be it didn't grow in for its niche. I mean,
Well,
if
what
it's the
about like
same if
in
it's the same genome, they would have an offspring.
but what about like, so there's otters that are almost seal-like, and
I know.
they're not as good at swimming as seals, and they're not as bad at walking as seals either.
Yeah.
But then there's certain otters that aren't as good at swimming, but they're better on land.
And then
So
the
like, it
question
seems
will be
like there's a
solved.
niche for every
The question will only be
variation.
solved when they compare the genomes. You could say, well, this was a completely different genome, but it decided to be a good swimming sea mammal. They're all very good at their little skills, but oh, guess what? Look, it is the same number of chromosomes. Let's compare them. Oh wow, they actually, pair up. Oh my gosh, we're getting zygosis. Something's happening. We're getting a freaking embryo here. Should we kill it now? Because that poor thing won't have a niche. It'll just suffer. Yeah, probably kill it now. The experiment's done. You've got the cell division. It was going to go into differentiation into a complex organism. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay.
So I don't see why not taking a fruit fly and modifying one of the chromosomes, to see if it'll get passed on. Maybe a mouse, just on the one side. And you say there's that one mouse. I still need to read it. I suspect that they.
Yeah.
I
Well, and that
it's and you what you say it was only an abstract, right?
that one I linked you. Yeah, I could only find the
Yeah.
abstract, but I
Yeah.
was cycling through them. I didn't even look for the full paper.
I think I ran into that abstract too.
Yeah, usually I can get the full thing without having to pay for it.
I usually try to type the title and then PDF and see if the PDF is out there somewhere.
And you can usually email the author and they'll just give it to you anyway.
Oh.
Yeah. Some of them are nice like that.
That's cool.
So yeah, the reason I wanted to discuss also is like it's more efficient way of getting at like what exactly do you need from me? So I have a better idea now.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like we're not disagreeing too much, but I'll run you through on at least on the phenotypic stuff. But I'll run you through the rest of kind of what my plan was to talk to you about. And I'm just going to go down the line here. So like nothing no red flags between these two organisms either. Like this
No,
seems like the type of variation like between the Yao Ming and the
yeah.
pygmy.
Well, yeah, but their ecosystems have dramatically changed. The top one is a swimmer, and the bottom one's land mammal
Well, the bottom
or
one
animal.
they think is more better adapted to water.
Was it more amphibious or something? Because I think, to me, the top one is the one that is shaped like someone that has fins and it kind of has side paddles. No? Am
Yeah, I mean
wrong?
part of that's the posing of the skeleton.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It looks like they're like paddles. He's like gonna swim with flippers. I don't know.
So here this one might be a little more
Okay.
obvious. Like this one, the bottom one's definitely more adapted to
Definitely
swimming.
water, yeah.
But would you say there's any skeletal changes here that aren't possible to be inherited in the same kind?
I actually don't have a problem with that. If I found out, actually, we were able to get the genomes and they're a match, and this thing was able to adapt to a brand new ecosystem over,
Okay.
I don't know,
So you
I
don't
don't know
think
how
it's
that happens, but
impossible for like the
I'm
whole the hip
I'm not
apparatus
against the notion
to
of
shrink?
that,
Right.
but I'm against using bones and the shape of the bones to say, oh, look, this is what must have happened. No, you don't have the data. You have a shapes thing. And just because a ball is round and so is a tire doesn't mean you can put a ball on your car and drive away.
Yeah, I mean that's more about the like this type of
It,
change
it,
is
it's
predicted by the model, so that's
it's childish thinking when it comes to what begat what. There are rules in cell biology that determine that, not the shape of bones. It's just
well,
true.
skeletal structure is inherited by it from parent to child, right?
But you're making it's the science of the gaps leap. It just is. You're saying, well, look how similar they are. Come on, don't you see it? Don't you see it?
Well,
And I
I'm trying
do.
to
I
keep
see
it
it. I see exactly what
as
you're talking about. But that doesn't mean that, like I
I'm trying
say,
to keep it like
birds have vast.
as
What?
few assumptions as possible. So I'm just asking, like,
I'm not against
is
the
it even a
idea.
possibility? Like, I'm
I
not even assuming evolution at this point. Like, it's
I
just
don't know how natural selection would adapt you to such a vastly different.
well, if both of them are adapted to swimming,
Okay, so they're both. So this is a
couldn't one
shoreline
be maybe
creature.
more of a deep water
Yeah.
adaptation or something like that?
Okay. Okay. So that's what they're saying. This one was like a shore hunter, and the bottom one was when the shore hunter was, you know,
They keep going further and
they keep
further
going
out.
further out, and so the ones that were more like the lower one started a new direction in their natural selection to that ecosystem. Okay. Okay. I'm not against it.
And so the modern skeleton compared with this one,
Okay.
any
Yeah.
red flags there?
No.
Okay. So we've made this leap from these two look pretty different, and yet there is a way to get from one to the other with just minor adaptations along the way. But that's just phenotypically. So it seems like you're more hung up on like the genetic barriers.
Well, that's what's in our hands. This ends up just being speculation. What's in our hands is all the information that we deal with all the time in our genetics, and it should be easily explainable. We shouldn't have to go look at old bones of creatures that have similarities that are interesting. We already have it in our hands. Why aren't we using it? Why are we talking about digging for bones in Africa or Australia? What you don't need it. It was already lifted up out into the lab. in 1975 and 1982. They set out to prove it, and they fell short. Sorry,
Well, we wouldn't be able
you
to
were
tell
using
what.
G banding techniques that shows, oh, look how similar these bands are. Look, we must be the same creature, and it didn't pan out.
We wouldn't be able to tell what the ancestors looked like based on modern genetics.
No,
But
right.
but you can very successfully predict them based on the theory of evolution.
I'm not convinced. I think there's a whole bunch of hidden stuff that's
Like this
turned off.
proposed ancestry was predicted simply by looking at the dolphin finger bones and saying this looks like an adaptation of a land animal, and then this whole series of fossils was found. There you can get pretty into the weeds with this. Like, no one was tracing it back like exactly like in the series that I have. I think the Pachycetus was discovered first. And they recognized it based on some skull bones. So then they started being like, well, we think that whales evolved from land animals. This clearly is like a land animal. It almost looks like a wolf, but it has these specific skull structures that are only ever seen in whales. So we think that they might be related. And then these other transitional type fossils were found as well. And they happen to be in the correct time zone, which is part of how they were found. So it's not just like, oh, they look similar, so they must be related. It's a whole complicated series of like, they were found and identified based on the theory of evolution.
It's an empty data set for me, because I'm only talking about mitosis, meiosis, zygosis, embryology, immunology, and population genetics. We shouldn't need to inject this as a side issue when we already have it all. We have it all. Where's the supercomputer calculation on how that diploid went to haploid and created a brand new diploid?
So,
They don't have it.
yeah, I mean, I think we've identified the target of where I'm gonna start trying to
Okay.
argue you towards now.
Yeah, it goes overcome that, and I'll have to shut up. I'll have to run for the hills, because I've been like, please show me, man. I mean, show me that it. They don't do it. It's
Yeah.
so simple. Such a simple experiment too. There should be tons of paper. Hey, we inserted this retrovirus size thing, and it actually made a whole new population, and we can prove it. And then make sure it's not fraudulent, and make sure that because sequencing equipment can be abused too. There's certain sequencing pieces of equipment that if you don't do it during metaphase, you'll get a result that completely skewed and falsely, you'll get a false idea about what you just proved or didn't prove. And there are papers titled about, oh, I know, there was a paper about how the centromere can move. It was in an agricultural university in China, and they're saying the centromere can move. Okay, no, can't. No. Oh, the piece of equipment you used, you didn't explicitly state in your methodology that you performed it during metaphase, like the equipment manufacturer said. So I have to assume you didn't do it correctly, and you came out with you were just a bunch of university students, so it's okay, no big deal. There's all kinds of, but again, it's kind of a straw man, but people will read the title and then they'll say, see, well, did you read the paper? Did you analyze the methodology?
Yeah, you have to do that.
You have to do that.
I mean, there's most of the time, if something's not right, everything goes wrong. but it's like, I don't know how much you've done like engineering or coding, but or even just like at home jury rig and stuff, and you try everything and careful structuring and everything fails, and then you do something that shouldn't work and yet it works. And
Yeah,
sometimes like genetics is like that sometimes.
that's why I like the Jeff Goldblum's character in Jurassic Park, where he does the chaos theory speech
Mm-hmm.
and says nature finds a way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we're so obsessed with if we could, we never ask the question if we should. It's a
Yes.
great character he plays. Yeah, so I
And
mean,
that's,
whatever. We're here, Brave New World. Get ready, you
yeah.
know.
And speaking of should, the other thing I'm shifting towards is going after like moral relativism now is my new mission.
Yeah, we need to take care of each other. There's no
Yeah.
doubt.
But
So it's
I'm a moral objectivist, so I'm going after the atheists now.
uh, well, you know, I thought you were being an anti-theist, and I would say to the anti-theists that they're in a much better spot than the atheists, because the anti-theists are maybe I shouldn't be too explicit, but what it is, it's a God struggle. And there's the notion that, love me or hate me, but do not ignore me, right?
Hmm.
So the anti-theists are not ignoring. They're actually, and if they win their own argument for the description of their existence, if they win that, they'll be stronger than anybody else. So that's why
Well, I do
it's
agree with that.
important to me.
If I think there's a problem right now, like there's like people do use religion, and when most people need something in place of religion, and as it is, just deconstructing your religion doesn't give anyone like a spiritual uh like replacement or anything like that. So I think what you said is, I'm not sure if you meant it this way, but if anti-theism becomes the new norm, they will have figured out some way to give an alternative spirituality or replace it somehow for the masses. And I'm one of those people who's like, I think there is a spirituality, even though I don't think that there are souls or gods or I think spirituality is something transcendental, and I think that's still possible in a more or less materialistic universe. And I think my opinion is that we really are a spiritually dead civilization, religion or not. I think that we kind of use the word spirituality as a replacement for real spirituality.
Well,
And a lot of, I think community does a lot of the heavy lifting there, and just ritual for the sake of ritual is satisfying to people, but I think ultimately it's empty. And I don't think that the new atheist movement has a solution to that, and that's a problem.
the ritual is meant to not forget. And what is it that we
Mm.
don't want to forget? We don't want to forget the lesson that the Bible teaches us. And it's a lesson. And the Bible is actually very myopic. It's very directly targeted at defeating one lie, just one, is that we are ashes to ashes and dust to dust. That's the lie that the serpent told in the garden. It says that it was God coming back, but I'm telling you that wasn't God, because God is omnipotent and omnipresent. So there wouldn't have been a need for God to say where are you guys? What happened, Eve? Okay, that was the serpent pretending to be God so that he could make them feel guilty and condemn them. What did he condemn them with? the idea that all you are is flesh and you will go to ashes. That's the lie. No, that's not true. Your existence is flesh inhabited by spirit, and this spirit contains a memory of you. And your flesh passes, and your spirit goes on, and there's reincarnation. Reincarnation isn't the goal, though, because if you keep appealing to reincarnation, it's like a soul trap. You'll love the things of the earth so many generations that you'll be here during the time that the earth goes through its magnetosphere retraction. And when the magnetosphere retracts, you're going to get the solar and cosmic radiation. It's going to wipe the atmosphere out before the sun ever turns into a red giant. So life on earth that you've been dedicated to because you believed in reincarnation will end. So I think the goal is to somehow not dedicate your existence to this world and try to start a process to realize that the Earth's days are numbered. I mean, that's something I agree with, and all science agrees with too. We know the Earth's days are numbered. Sure, it's far, far off, but ultimately, and I think that's why the universe is so huge. I think there's a whole bunch of planets out there, and I didn't get that from a religion. I know there's a religion that actually believes that. Actually believes that they live your best life, and someday, if you're really, really good, you'll become the Adam and the Eve on your own new planet. Like, I don't believe that. I have no clue.
That's Mormonism.
Yeah, I think for Mormons saying that, but whatever. I see it not as I don't covet it. I don't think that I care about. I think I care about my flesh. I have a survival instinct, but my survival instinct also tells me that if I'm going to get recycled, I want to get recycled in a world that has respect for me as a human being, where the rules are you can't kill someone, you can't lie to them because lying is a way to wage war against somebody. You can't steal from them because it's so insulting that they're gonna want to kill you. Maybe when you work so hard and someone steals your wealth, they stole your labor, and it's maddening. And so those are good rules. Honor your mother and father. Rest on the seventh day. Don't commit adultery. Those are all good rules because all of those things hurt people's feelings. And in the case of murder, it ends them, and there's no remedy for that. There's no like, oh, sorry, I stole that from you, but I can pay you back and suffer what any other consequences you'd have me suffer. So so that I don't do that again. So there's remedy for those things, but I'm not allowed to murder you because you don't belong to me. You're God's property. Okay, so that's the higher authority where men don't have an answer for that. Men will kill you. Men are the tyrants. So we need to have that appeal to a higher authority where there's cosmic justice. And teach people, hey, guess what? You're in the same boat. You feel all powerful in this world, but ultimately you're in the same boat, and you have to come back to the world that you created too. You ready? You're going to be a small child at first. You're going to be vulnerable. So let's be nice to each other.
I mean, I don't think you need to appeal to some kind of authority other than just facts.
Just mankind is not the end all authority. The universe is.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Like what you were saying earlier is like these behaviors don't work. They can't create a working society if you do these behaviors, and that's we don't need to have some beings saying that they don't work. It's just that the facts of how people interact is it's not going to work.
It's inherent. It's like it's just as inherent as God said, "Be fruitful and multiply." You don't have to tell me that God said that. It's apparent. I live in my body. I know what it wants to do, and it's not really in my control. that's I'm wired for that. You don't have to tell me God said that. It's just apparent. I hold that truth to be self-evident.
Yeah.
Duh. But yeah, anyway, cool. So we know where we're at. I just wanted to inject that cell biology.
Yeah, well, we both got some homework to do now.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, are you going to send me more articles in the email or whatever?
Yeah, I'll just email you what I've got. Yeah.
So I got.
So I sent you a couple of them in the private chat, but
Yeah.
I'll get you a better list.
Endogenous retroviruses and now the chromosomal fusion one.
Yeah.
Okay.
All righty.
Cool.
Well, thanks for joining me today or tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll do a round 2.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Rock on.
Yeah, and I'll be editing my current project and
Oh, you're gonna do another
we'll see
video?
It's been in the works since July or June,
Oh, wow.
I think.
Oh, it's a lot to plan. Yeah.
It was
Your
almost
Genesis
done,
video was
and
great.
then I mean, I'm not trying to like not spoil it. I'm just trying to like not have to go on a tangent and unpack everything. But it's about the election, it's about corruption, and the election threw a wrench into the ending of my video. So.
Yeah. I mean, we're in weird times. This AI stuff is pretty scary, but that's a tiger that we better have by the tail.
Yeah, that could go either way.
I know. Woo. Crazy days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, yeah, we've been going for 2 hours.
Yeah. It goes by quick.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to be trying to get back into YouTube more frequently. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd never seen you before, and then you were all of a sudden on Donnie's channel, and I couldn't see the picture. It kind of looked like Gandalf, with his head bound down with 2 arms coming up, and it was so hilarious looking. It just looked funny, man.
Oh, the snake. Yeah.
Your snake. Yeah, he's like this, and it looks like Gandalf. Like,
it does kind of look like a little beard coming off.
Yeah, and then that part is his beard. Yeah, and I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, it's a snake with little arms.
Yeah. That was back in my fledgling Photoshop days.
Snake was right.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on, and
hey, thanks again.
I'm gonna hit the hay.
Right on. It's late.
Yeah.
All right. Good night.
Good night, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. Leave a comment and subscribe if you're not subscribed. I'm not going away, even though I've been away for a little while. So, yeah. And, oh yeah. My ending tagline is "Dog bless."
Dog bless. You inverted.
Alrighty. Yeah.
All right. Later on.
Peace.
Bye.